Welcome at the Natural History Museum. We have made a subdivision into biology and paleobiology, and John will guide you through the paleobiology part, so enjoy your visit.
Well, welcome to the Natural History Museum. What you are going to be shown is material that you will be experiencing when you roam the streets of Maastricht, but you have absolutely no idea that you're right on top of these things. Because when you do roam the streets of Maastricht, this stuff will be around 50 meters below your feet. You know, at St. Petersberg, to the south of the city, you will find this at a quarry, at a disused quarry. You can go into the quarry, you can see that, you can feel the atmosphere. But this was a subtropical ocean with water temperatures between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. And in that lived all kinds of animals that have absolutely no counterparts in present-day North Sea or Atlantic Ocean. So this is either the Caribbean or Indonesia, some 66 million years ago. Enjoy your visit. Okay, we start out here in a temporary exhibit, which we've got at the museum almost every half year or every year. And this is a very special one. It's Rock Fossils on Tour. It's a Scandinavian production, so it was already in Sweden and in Denmark and various places in Germany and in Luxembourg. Because officially, you know, paleontologists are usually seen as people who work in dark corners, you know, are focused on fossils, have absolutely no idea of reality of the world around them. So they're a bit weird, so to speak. But most of them are actually absolutely not weird, and they are into rock music of various disciplines, as you can see here. And what they do usually, when they find a new fossil that they can describe officially, yeah, in a scientific paper, they can name it after a special character trait of the fossil, they can name it after the place it was found in, or they can name it after their favorite rock musician. And this is what happened. So we selected quite a number of interesting fossils like trilobites, you know, they look a bit like wood lice, ophiuroids, brittle stars, but even a dinosaur. There's a dinosaur on exhibit named after Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. Later in the year we are going to do our own rock fossil, because we've got a brittle star from the NC quarry in the St. Petersberg, so not too far from the museum, and it will be named after Floor Jansen of Nightwish. So we already told her that it will be coming, and hopefully in the autumn the paper will be formally published. Okay, this is one of our prize objects. It's one of the things that was left behind after one of the exhibits on Chinese dinosaurs many years ago. You can see a 3D globe, and on the globe you can see that the configuration of the continents is completely different throughout the ages, throughout the geological ages. So we started the Devonian Carboniferous around 300 million years ago, and it will go up to the Cretaceous. The Cretaceous, the last part of the Cretaceous, is extremely important for us because it's named the Maastrichtian. And you can see what happened. So there's a lot of water in the oceans, because there's absolutely no ice caps on the North Pole or on the South Pole, so absolutely no ice. So all these kilometers thick ice sheets on present-day Antarctica, they were melted down, so there was absolutely no ice. So the water was just in the oceans, but the capacity of the oceans is of course not indefinite. So what happens is that the water goes onto the continents, and we get these so-called epicontinental seas. And during the Maastrichtian, during the latest Cretaceous, around 70 to 66 million years ago, the sea level was around 200 meters higher than it is today. So that gives you some idea of what things looked like. Okay, let's continue to the next object. Okay, here we are in the Mosasaur Hall, and Mosasaurs is of course extremely emblematic for Maastricht. Mosasaur literally means the lizard of the Meuse River, the Maas River, of course, which is a bit ridiculous. Lizards do not live in soft water, in freshwater rivers. So what happened, you already saw that we are in a subtropical sea. Water depth would have been between 150 and 50 meters, in some places even less than 10 meters. And in these things lived as a top or apex predator, mosasaurs. And here you can see a romantic picture of underground galleries with 5 guys with enormous biceps and triceps, and they were able to prepare something that they found themselves, but they had absolutely no idea what it represented. So, and then you can see 2 guys on the left. These guys were the so-called intellectuals of Maastricht. So they read books, they had so-called curiosity cabinets at home, so they had their own private museum, so to speak. And they had absolutely no idea. So, and this was done in October 1778. So in those days, Roman Catholic Maastricht, they had absolutely no idea about the world around them. So what they did, they went to church, the priest read from the Bible, and there was the story, of course, of Noah's Ark. You know, everything that was not on Noah's Ark died in the biblical flood. So this would have been a victim of the biblical flood. But what does it represent? When you look at the jaws, it could have been a crocodile or a toothed whale, because these creatures were the only ones that they knew from recent settings and that they could compare this mosasaur to. And then later it turned out, 30, 40 years later, that this was a marine lizard. So a lizard that lived in the sea, developed salt glands and all kinds of other stuff to be able to grow in there. And they reached around 17 meters in total length, and they were distributed worldwide. So you've got mosasaur fossils on all continents, including Antarctica. But it started in Maastricht, and we've got 6 species in total. So all of them had their own niche, their own biotope. So there was no real conflict between them. Okay, you see mosasaurs and dinosaurs, it's just dinosaur skeleton, a reconstruction. This is a so-called hadrosaur. These are plant-eating animals. Of course, the only bones that we've got is just scraps, because dinosaurs lived on land, and when they die, they can only be transported via rivers into the sea or into an ocean. So the chance of finding a complete mosasaur skeleton, dinosaur skeleton, in Maastricht is virtually nil. And then what we've got in between these legs of the dinosaurs were small mammals. Here's a reconstruction. We know that these guys are like an opossum, so it's one of these mammals with a pouch, like a kangaroo. These things lived in Europe during the Eocene, some 40 million years ago. But we've got precursors. Here we've got one small tooth of the left upper jaw, and this is our ancestor, basically. So when dinosaurs like T-Rex and these things died out at the end of the Cretaceous, because of the impact of these bolides and the meteorite in Mexico, these things bloomed afterwards. So 66.02 million years ago, the bolide struck, these things start developing and radiate into all mammal orders that we know today, including ourselves. We've got loads and loads of echinoids, sea urchins. Maastricht is famous for its sea urchins, especially that one, bulbous thing. Everybody in Maastricht and in the environs know these things, because people that had their grandfather working at the quarry, they knew they had these things at home, they had their own collections. But what I want to show you is these things. There's one tooth, one isolated tooth and one isolated vertebra of so-called plesiosaurs. And plesiosaurs were those things, fish-eating reptiles that lived at the same time as mosasaurs and dinosaurs on land, but these were so-called oceanic animals. So they did not live in shallow water seas like the one in Maastricht. So, but the fossils are here. So how to explain that? They didn't live here, they didn't go for any prey, for any fish. Well, when they die mid-ocean, there is a sort of decomposition going on, and what happens then, that their belly functions as a sort of balloon. So these cadavers or carcasses go drifting, and when the ocean currents are right, they will be swept ashore, basically. And before they are swept ashore, they lose all kinds of parts of their anatomy, parts of their skeleton. So an isolated vertebrae here, an isolated tooth there. So we know that they lived contemporaneously, but they never existed in this particular shallow water setting. Okay, then we're at 66.02 million years ago. The meteorite struck in Mexico, so it did quite a lot of harm. in the seas and on land. So around 75 to 80% of all animal and plant life died out at this particular moment. And then later, of course, there are always resilient species. Either they live in fresh water or they live on land. They hibernate and they come back and then repopulate the earth, so to speak. And one of these groups, as we saw before, was the mammals. And the mammals also went back to the sea. So evolution normally works from coming out of the water, onto the land and into the air, but it can come back from time to time. So there are groups during evolution that went back to the water, and one of them are deer-like creatures, and these deer-like creatures were first in fresh water and then later ventured out into seawater and gave us whales, toothed whales and baleen whales. And one of the whale skeletons that we've got from this particular area, and this was lying in this showcase from the late 70s of the last century. It was found at the same quarry as the one that produces the mosasaur skeletons. So what happens? The Cretaceous ends with all these Mesozoic animals, so the animals of the old-fashioned types, and then the new ones come in. This whale skeleton is around 35 million years old, and it is of a so-called primitive whale, a so-called archaeocete, of which we've got finds in Poland, in Ukraine, in Russia, but also in the North Sea. In some places in the North Sea, where the present-day sea erodes material and then washes it ashore, you can find vertebrae and ribs of this particular animal. And these looked very close to mosasaurs and their complete habit. But they were mammals, and mosasaurs were reptiles. By now we're in the early Pleistocene, so around 2 million years ago. So it's completely land, absolutely no sea anymore. The sea retreated to the present-day North Sea, basically, the distribution. And then we've got here a very eclectic mix of all kinds of animals that you would associate with Africa today. So you got tapir, you got woolly rhinoceros, you got horses, but you also got deer, some kinds of elephants, you've got beavers, and monkeys. We've got monkeys over here. These are the animals that live on the rocks of Gibraltar. This macaque, yeah? These lived here around 2 million years ago. So that gives you some idea about the temperature. So it was much warmer than today, otherwise these animals would not have lived here. Well, this is one of our latest additions, one of our mosasaurs, nicknamed Carlo. And it's named after one of the people who worked at the quarry and found it. So he recognized it, he recognized the bone structure, and he said immediately, "Stop my machine." And he invited us to get the stuff out of the quarry. And the interesting thing is, when we look at the lower jaw and part of the muzzle, yeah, the front part of the upper jaw, you can see that there is material missing, and there is some kind of scar tissue. And when we went with these things to the local hospital, to the academic hospital in Maastricht, it was CT scanned, and we saw that part of the muzzle was missing. And we could prove that there were bite marks that originated from a bite of another mosasaur. So there was competition between these things. They were reptiles, so they probably fought for prey or for women folk, basically, to reproduce. And then part of the structure, the front part of the face of this mosasaur was badly damaged. We started developing infections, and there was all kinds of pus structure in there. So there was some reconstruction ongoing when the animal died, but basically it could not feed that well anymore and just probably died of starvation. Well, I'm not too proud to say that we were sleeping, because this particular specimen was lying at the museum for around 20 years before we realized what we had. So this is a very, very interesting bird, because it's a bird of a modern type. So during the Maastrichtian, during the latest Cretaceous, we had birds that were extremely close to dinosaurs, their ancestors. But they had feathers, some of them had claws at their wings, but all of them had teeth, functional teeth. Nowadays, you will not find any bird that has teeth. This one is a toothless bird, and it occurred together with the tooth-bearing birds in the same strata, in the same layer, geological layer. So this now went to Cambridge. It's lying, the original specimens are in Sedgwick Museum of University of Cambridge in England. So that's the reason why they're still not here, because they were also, taken by coronavirus. But we've got here a 200% sized 3D print of the skull of this bird. And the interesting thing is, when you look at the anatomical features of this skull, it combines characteristics of chickens or chicken-like birds and duck-like birds. So this is one of the common ancestors of these two groups, because when you nowadays would put a duck and a chicken next to each other, would you say that they were directly related? Don't think so.
Hi, thank you for your visit at the museum. This was only a small part of the museum what you've seen. If you want to see more, you can come in with a student discount. Hope to see you soon.